Commission, starting now at 7:16 p.m. on September 30th. The first item for this evening is to prepare for the Arbor Haven presentation. Arbor Haven was asked to present to some number of town boards and commissions by the Board of Selectmen, and they have started those presentations. I was indicated to me that they knew of our meeting schedule, and I made an assumption perhaps that they would be contacting me to coordinate when they would present. Since I haven't heard following this meeting, I'll reach back out into town hall, and I would assume I would be arranging that presentation for the 21st. The goal tonight for preparing for their presentation is to prepare a set of questions that we can submit to them. And I would, the thought was, as I said briefly in our last meeting, that we would send the questions to Arbor Haven and have them prepare answers for us in writing, and perhaps give us a chance, therefore, when they do the presentation, they can present or stress parts of their proposal that are important to us, that address our questions in those areas, and that we can dig a little deeper into their proposal. So the goal tonight is on the questions themselves. It is to massage the questions, if you will, eliminate. We had 4 people, I think, give questions. I want to make sure we eliminating duplicates, add items as we look at the questions again, and perhaps it will generate new thoughts in a brainstorming manner, and we add questions as needed. I tried not to eliminate any questions that were submitted, so there may be duplicates. But I did edit, as I said in my email, that just to give some consistency to the questions themselves. I also think, and would ask you to look at this, if you agree, as you go through the questions, that we should probably take out questions that are obviously answered in the presentation that you all have, and we can keep that in mind as we look at the questions. I think there are a couple in there that struck me as already in the proposal and shouldn't really need to be answered again. With that, I guess we can start. So let me see if I can figure out one more time how to share a different file.
Sorry, Tim, just before we go on, you were going through the roll call.
Yes, we can do that. Recap that quickly. I thought, Diane, I had heard you doing that up top, so thought perhaps you had.
I wrote everybody down. I just don't want to get anybody's title wrong. David, are you town staff? And is Pua a commission member?
Pua is the person responsible for broadcasting and recording meetings of boards and commissions in town.
Okay.
I'm sure there's a more official title, but I can look that up at some point.
Town staff.
A videographer is not it, but that may describe it. David Lober is our liaison from the Board of Selectmen.
Yeah, I don't have an answer to that question.
Okay.
I don't know what her specific title is. Sorry.
And David, actually, I'm glad that I'm glad you spoke up. I want to make a comment very quickly in just a minute. Diana, was there any other clarification you need on the people attending? So it's Barbara.
I think I've got all the other commissioners.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So David, the comment to you was to just to, um, as we go through this, we welcome, just in case there would be any hesitation on your part, uh, we would welcome your comments and thoughts as we go through here. So feel free. Um, uh, this could be tedious. You know what? um, all right, I cannot edit. Apparently I can't share the document I'm editing, which is very strange. I will have to research more on that. Most of the programs I've been associated with, you can share your screen. Here I had to share a file, and I'm sharing the file, but I can't edit in it in real time. So this will be perhaps even more tedious than I thought. Um, my 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 hope was to go through this section by section, uh, and just ask for people's comments on the wording of any of the items in that section, and or deletions, and or additions if you're so inclined. Um, uh, and there were places where two people had the same sort of comment, same type, and where they should be combined. So I'm going to, it's hopefully shared. You have a copy that I sent you, although an example on the screen is down in the very bottom in open space. There were some questions that came in after I had sent this out. So there are some items that are in, well, I'll call it violet for lack of a better description, and you'll see those throughout here. So if you're looking at your own copy because you wrote notes on it, etc., occasionally glance up at the screen and you may see um, other another question or two interspersed here that may need a comment. Uh, so I'm going to flip over on, at least on my side, I'm not going to stop sharing. Um, and I'm going to slip over to the word process, so I won't be seeing the screen anymore per se. Um, so the first section is design.
Tim, before we get going, can I just ask one question of people? Who watched or heard last night's meeting? Did any of you?
I did. This
I
is
did.
Tim.
I watched it.
That inform some of these questions, because some things were answered and some really not answered adequately in my mind, and those might be things to also focus in on when questions up.
Good point. There are, if there are things that are very germane to our area of concerns that are not documented in the proposal, but just were verbally answered, may be worthwhile even to keep a question in about those, just so we have um, that answer, and it's understood clearly by everyone. Um, so on the design, and what? So I'm going to just open it. We'll go section by section. Are there and maybe I should do this item by item. So on the first item, how many intended structures are proposed for the country club property? Any comments on that one?
Right. That number is known to us now from the presentation, correct?
It's I believe it's in the presentation.
Yes.
I believe both of these are, and I suggest we remove it since it's there.
I don't know that what is the square footage of the various structures.
Is there? Okay, I'll leave that.
Yeah, I think they just put that, they put it in by number of bedrooms or affordable housing or whatever.
Then fine.
The intended structures, I think, would they put in there like 145 houses, something like that?
Yeah.
And then a clubhouse.
All right.
I don't know if there were other structures we're curious about too.
Um,
Well, there were some other things like tennis courts and stuff like that, but these are mostly the structures.
all right. The second item, why are affordable houses and large homes not intermixed but separated? Next, what percentage of total acreage?
They kind of spoke to that. The large homes they want to put along, along Johnston Road and Ansonia Road because that keeps more with the character of the houses that are already on those streets. They're going to put the larger homes along the periphery, and then they're going to put the affordable homes and the smaller homes in the interior of the golf course.
So I'll leave it to the person, and that is what I heard last night.
Yeah.
And in another presentation, actually, but I'll leave it to the person who submitted the question of whether they'd like it or are satisfied and okay with it being removed. But if you'd like it addressed further,
I'd like it addressed further, personally.
okay.
If anybody lives in Woodbridge and understands, I don't know, just the common understanding of the difference between living up the hill and in the flats.
Next one, what percentage of total acreage will be built upon? Straightforward question. Next question is, are you proposing to charge for the land?
Can we say built upon and then also like developed, or
Yep.
structures will be built upon and then developed? Because I think
But disturbed at all from its natural state? What percentage?
yeah, certainly paving paving driveways and whatnot is going to be developing the land without it being built upon. So I want to make sure there's no gray area in that.
Yeah, so is it really or developed rather than and developed? Built upon or developed?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Are you proposing to charge for the land? And I'll have, well, that, I mean, to me, they're charging for the houses sit on the land, so I perhaps didn't understand the
Was the question about the land that they were going to give back to the town?
I think the question is, well, the person that put it in could speak to it, but it sounds like the question is, in a normal sale, you buy the land and then you buy the building that is put on it. So I think that's what it meant, but I don't know. I did not put the question in.
Hmm.
But that was my interpretation.
Tim, I just have a comment on the previous question.
Sure.
There's a rule in the new zoning. It's actually the same as the old zoning, that only 22% of the acreage can be covered with a combination of driveways, paving, and the footprint of the house. Now, it's a little confusing because the duplex houses, the two family houses are going to be built on a third of an acre, roughly.
Right.
Yeah, so I don't know if they're going to conform to the
Well-
22%. They probably will. I mean, overall, it probably will.
Yeah, I mean, they you have to assume that they're planning to conform or someone's going to hold them accountable for that. So,
Well, we can be one of those people though.
yeah, maybe that, Dave, that sheds light upon the approach that they have outlined that says they're going to buy it for a certain amount of money, the parcel, 140 plus acres, although I saw it stated as 160 someplace. But then at the end, they're going to deed back some of the open space. Maybe that helps them get to the 22% if they can count the whole, but then at the end, give some of it back. So maybe that's a way to keep within the 22%. Interesting. So Sharon, I think is my recollection is the charge for the land came with your list.
No,
could
I
be-
don't think so. I didn't mean to say that.
Okay, so I'm going to take this question out if no one.
No, I'm not. I don't think that question makes much sense to me. So I don't.
Okay.
Well, I
Um,
think, just back to what I think Barbara made a comment about it. Clarifying whether or not they're charging people like for the land and then they're charging them for the construction, or if they've already got the construction designs in mind and they sell it as one package.
Okay, well then I can amend that to say, and then a separate charge for the house. See, they, well, I don't want to get into what they will explain, so I'll just leave it and let them explain it next time. I heard some explanation last night. When built, who will be responsible for road maintenance and snow removal? It's something that was addressed last night, but they can address it. It was verbal.
And there were questions regarding that sometimes even when it initially goes for road maintenance, the town has to take it over because the association of houses doesn't it hasn't worked, at least for another piece of land, according to some people last night. So
Right.
I think first of all, all this is proposed. So when we talk about it, I'd like to talk about it as proposed, not this is what they're gonna do. It's what they hope to do.
This is what they would do.
What they are hoping to do.
Would do if they were successful.
Yeah. So, but I think we need, from past experience, there needs to be more assurances or more. How do they address any eventualities of the association not paying for it, or how do we know it's not going to become a responsibility of the town? So I think it's still a valid question.
Okay. Are there refill spaces allowed? How many max? How many structures is your break even?
They addressed that last night and they said they took the retail spaces out. Because the question was raised, are you planning on getting a permit for retail space? And they said, we're taking that out of the plan. So the plan is a little, one of a better word, squishy. The details are not solidly in place right now, but we have a general idea of what they're doing. And I think they are not doing retail space anymore.
I'd still like to have on the record to say that they aren't in a meeting there. Conservation Commission involved, just to assure us that that isn't happening. If they are thinking of it, we get to address it, even if they're slightly.
I thought it was about for the future retail spaces. So maybe not something that they were doing right away, but maybe something that they were preparing the land for the future.
Okay, so we're going to leave that in. We're down to how many more structures beyond the
Can
proposed?
I add to that too? If they are removing as they said they would, what are they going to do with that area?
Okay.
Well, and that can be our follow-up.
Mm-hmm.
And also, if they're having low-income housing where they don't expect everyone to have a car, how are they hoping to have that and not have any way for people to get, food or toiletries or pharmacy? Like there's a little disconnect there too.
That sounds like a new question. So Sharon, I'm going to suggest you jot that down, and when we get to the end, there maybe is a place to put those. And unless it's part of design, and you can help me how to structure it, a question around how.
If needs arise for
I think like the accessibility for low income housing.
Is that so? It would go in the affordable housing section.
Well, maybe it's not even the affordable housing section. Maybe it's just they've based on the assumptions that they've made for like the proposed inhabitants of the area, not having vehicles, how are they proposing to provide access to transportation to
Right, and that's why I said
infrastructure?
there's a place on the end for other questions, and I was just suggesting we can, when
Okay,
we get down to that section, we can add that one in there.
okay.
Um, and just try to,
Okay,
uh,
yeah.
because these are organized but if things are misplaced, we should remove them. Um, I've lost my place. How many more structures beyond the proposal in front of us? That question, any comments? Next
No,
one.
but since we talked about road maintenance and snow removal, and I think it's part of design, just be curious about materials they're going to use, whether they're uh, permeable or pervious surfaces for roads. And what was the other question?
Can I just address that?
Um,
They talked about roads as being something which was completely permeable. Now, from my experience on wetlands, any altered surface has a coefficient that's very different, even if it's a stone permeable, quote unquote, that affects runoff. They did address it. I think definitely address it more with us, but I also think we need to challenge them because what they were saying didn't make sense, and it was like a very. I mean, they need to tell us the coefficient or the percentage, because when runoff gets to be a problem and permeability, it's not just it's an engineered science. It's not just a guessing game.
Yeah, so
okay.
the use of permeable surfaces, and the other one was low heat retention materials.
Uh-huh.
Okay, Diana, can I suggest you hold that to sustainability?
Sure.
I did I did add a question at the bottom here. What materials will be used on roads and bike walking paths?
Okay.
To capture the first part of it. There are a number of items like that in sustainability, so I think I'd like to ask you to hold it till then. The next question, what features of the project will enhance the lives of Woodbridge citizens, etc.? There seem to be two entrances, exits on Woodfield Road. What is the purpose of the two entrances so close together? What utility services will be above ground? On what roads will each utility services be connected? And those are all the questions we had in design. All right, next section. Unless someone has something they want to add.
I think it delves into native plants or remediation, but in design, there's a lot of space that they could put attention to remediation, even if it isn't the set aside land. I don't think we need a question. I just think it's design is a bigger picture in some ways than just these questions. But I'm willing to. I can go on. Sorry, Tim.
I was just going to ask about. I can't see the lower part with the sustainability, so maybe it's in there. But is there any question about? Is there anything we've put in there about resiliency for the utility services?
There is nothing in there about resiliency. When we get to that section, why don't we look at that?
Okay.
Make a note for yourself. And so affordable housing is the next section. So that there's only two. So the first item, I'm not going to read it.
Why not? Less access.
I guess I'll be tired of reading by the end of this. um, any comment on the first one?
No.
No.
And then the second one, which is a sort of known answer, but we'll let them answer that.
This is another question, and I spoke to Valerie for a minute, and if she wasn't able to say something about this, but her real estate, that something starts as an affordable home, and then once that person sells it, they don't necessarily have to sell it as affordable home. So is there a stipulation as to how long it has to stay an affordable home?
Yeah, my comment on that is it is completely dependent on how the deed is set up. And we have a section down below about the deeds. And so let's make sure we make sure that that type of question is in there.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Understanding is that it's my understanding is that it's 40 years.
Well,
It's for 40 years.
I mean, you can do a lot of different things in a deed. 40 years is the state threshold for counting it towards a valid, affordable housing within the town. So if it's only affordable for 10 years, the state's not, it may be affordable, but it won't count to the state count of how many affordable homes you have. So the challenge is to make sure that Arbor Haven, if they were to go forward, would commit to putting in deeds that these are 40 years to get it counted to those counts.
Is there, my understanding from another project that we're working on is there, that we're not allowed to have age restriction be something applied to affordable housing. And I don't know much about that, but if they're considering some of like the housing for, a certain age group and up, and that is what they're considering to be affordable housing, that, for kind of some federal dollars or for
Yeah.
certain qualifications, it can't be, there can't be an age restriction on there.
I
So
certainly have no knowledge of that.
Did you say can or can't, Diana?
cannot. So like if
Mm-hmm.
if we were going for a, I don't know, federal grant, like the case where the project we're working on now is a federal grant to help refurbish some of the housing, and they have to remove the age restriction requirement from there because you can no longer discriminate against, um, with an age restriction for your affordable housing. So I don't know if what they're referring to as affordable housing is if there's like a certain requirement, like just like you were talking about with the deed for 40 years, if there's a certain requirement in the state, and they're saying, oh, 20 houses will be, or 10 houses will be, for families, and 15 houses will be for 55 and older, if there's that sort of age restriction on there, if it discounts or disqualifies the affordable housing.
So
What
are
are we
you
talking?
that there's a portion that's age restricted and that may no longer be valid? That the portion they're thinking about making for senior housing may have to be opened up to any age group?
Yeah.
So that would be a big issue for the school system and any number of other aspects of Woodbridge.
So, Diana, you want to help me frame a question? I can add a question to this section. Is there, are maybe we should say, are any of the any
Or any of the age
of
restricted
the
houses?
affordable housing units age restricted?
If so, that may not be valid and your calculations may need to be rethought of.
Affordable, and I know you can't see what I'm typing here.
We trust you, Tim.
Or any of the affordable housing, he doesn't like the word units, house, affordable houses, age restricted. Okay, we'll just ask a straightforward question.
Well, I think we need to be reminded that if they are, that might not, do they know of this new law that may not make that possible to enforce?
And that may just be a rule for the, the federal government grant. I don't know if that's,
So I'll just,
But that might be ask the selectmen, is there a chance that our assumptions are wrong and in 3 or 4 years we'll have to change the senior housing to be open up to any ages and thus change the,
Or just call it senior housing as opposed to affordable housing. I don't know.
See, I'm sorry, you think the question is, are any of the age restricted housing? No, I thought it was whether some of the affordable housing was age restricted would be the
Right.
problem.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was the way I wrote the question, or any affordable, well, it should be, is any of the affordable housing age restricted? And then I was trying to get second question as part of that, are there any state or federal regulations concerning this? I'm going to write it that way.
You probably find it in Title 8 in
Yeah.
the
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Connecticut State Department of Housing.
and this particular person, at least the lead, yesterday and the other days I heard him talk, he's comfortable with saying I don't know, or that's not my area. Either I shouldn't answer it. There's somebody else, or it's up to the town, or you know. So he won't be shy about doing that. But so we can ask that question. Okay, that
That's
moves us.
if someone says, I don't know, that's partly their responsibility to know that because they're proposing it as if it's
Well,
going it can withstand the test of time and law. So
right.
they go back to the drawing house and do the research. It's not just
Yes. I mean, and he has said that. He said, I don't know, and I will find out. He said that on occasions. On other occasions, he said it's really not, it's something the town should be looking at, or, some entity in the town. And my reference was just to, I'm having a little trouble with my wording here. It's a hard to ask one person a question on all state and federal regulations. So he may say, I don't know of any, but that may, Diana's concerned about some grants. You know,
I have another
we still may have that concern.
Tim, they should know about this because when you build affordable housing, you apply for assistance from the federal government.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
They should know the regulations. Their
Yeah,
lawyers should
so-
be up on this, and if they don't answer the question, you have to think about why.
It is a valid question. Good question.
So that was I guess that helps answer the question a bit too, is what David just said. If they're looking to do affordable housing, they'd probably be looking for government funding assistance to build those.
Okay.
and maybe we should ask them if they are. So the other thing is something that they've received, the senior housing, can that then be changed or is that deeded in for the next 50 or 100 years? Because that would also change the reality of the burden to the town if for the first 10 years it's senior housing and then they can't sell enough units and there aren't enough demand and they have this glut of housing and it'd be better if somebody was paying taxes versus nobody paying taxes, so we'll change it. And is that fungible? Because I've seen rules be changed before by the Board of Selectmen. Do they have the option to revisit that if it isn't working as the imagined plan was proposed?
Sharon, I'm going to confess I zoned out for a second because I was trying to make sure that the questions everyone was seeing was reflecting where we were, where I was on the other document that I'm editing, and I just missed your question per se. Can you just?
My question
Is that let me ask it this way: is that a question to be added here?
yes. I think so. What do other people think? I mean, it's pertinent to how it will affect the town.
All right. So help me with the wording then.
So
This is under design, correct?
well
No.
under build out.
Under okay. So can you hold that until we get the build out?
We are at build out.
I thought we were at open space.
Well, I'm at build out, so.
Okay.
I thought we were at affordable housing. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
we were just finishing affordable housing.
Right.
Well,
so
I
that-
think I think the senior housing was something they were qualifying as affordable housing, right? So I think it probably goes in that
Yes,
section.
yes, they're including that in their numbers very
So-
clearly.
Tim, if you want, the question I would think is, there is proposed housing that is restricted to seniors only, that will have a certain effect on the town and the town's expenses. Is there any possibility that restriction can be changed in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and thus allow many more people with children to come into the town and change the whole cost structure that has been proposed by Arbor Haven?
The answer to that question is yes, because that's been successfully tested in Florida, where elderly people couldn't sell their homes, so that they removed the restriction, and they were successful in court. So yeah, there's precedent for that. If you have a homeowners association which is in charge of that, the homeowners association can vote to do that, to sell off the age restricted housing to people who are not not over 55.
So that's huge. I
Yeah,
think
it is huge. It
that's
is
a
huge.
stopper right there, because I don't think in a place that has that few amenities that there's going to be that many seniors at that price that are going to build there. People come for the house, for the schools. They
I'll
don't.
tell you what the problem really is. When the elderly die, and then their family has to dispose of the house, they have to make a decision. Sometimes they can't sell it, and then they apply for the removal of that restriction.
Right,
Or
and
if, many of the individuals in the homeowners association decide that they want to sell their houses and they can't because they don't have people over 55, then they can remove that restriction. There are some penalties for that, financial penalties, from the state, but you can do that. It's not written in stone, in other words.
So,
So that-
Sharon, I'm crafting a short question that I've so far phrased this way, and I'm putting it down in. I've skipped ahead, which I usually try not to do, but in this case, I've skipped ahead down to the deeding and protections over time, and the question I've crafted is, what protections are there to keep age-restricted housing age-restricted? So asking it in trying to get to the understanding of what, how is that going to be restricted? If it's homeowner association, that's one, set of concerns. If it's in the deed, that is a different level of protection, I believe.
But what we're hearing from Dave, who has some knowledge, is that it's not ironclad at all, and town residents should be aware of that. And
Yeah, well, I guess the question for Dave to extend that conversation is, I mean, how was it protected and who changed it? In the case you're citing, Dave. I think you mentioned a homeowners association.
Right. I mean, yeah, these particular developments in Florida had homeowners associations, and as I said before, they decided that by a vote of the homeowners association,
Right.
to eliminate that particular requirement.
Right, and I think the homeowners association is a different level of protection of, in this case, age restriction than a deed protection would be. So I think the suitable question for them is, how is this going to be protected to be age restricted? And they said the intent is to put it in the deeds, and that's, that's a, that, to me, that's a little different conversation.
Our responsibility to alert people that in the past, even with a deed restriction, I mean, because every child is $17,000. That's a huge tax difference if all of a sudden 45 units can have two children.
Correct. So I think, and I don't know the answer to this question, who can change the deed? How can the terms of a deed be changed? And I think it has to be, I don't know the answer to that, quite honestly.
I want to say one thing.
Mhm.
At 5, my husband had a 9-year-old. So it's not like just because you're 55, you can't have children.
No, right.
You can have grandchildren and stuff. So I think we need to, at least that's just another point in terms of challenging the economics of how it's being by
All
our
right.
Yeah,
I'm gonna jump.
this was raised, excuse me, this was raised in the last proposal when they were going to be putting in only elderly housing, the Insight proposal. And the question was raised is, what happens if your, newly divorced daughter with her 2 children moves into your house? Can the homeowners associations allow that or not allow that? So it's a difficult thing to enforce. Do you force that person to sell their home in that situation?
Yeah, or
So
do you make them
raising
pay
a lot of
tuition?
questions. Right.
Are there some rules that say people in age restricted housing can't send their kids to public school? I know that seems to me that would be, yeah, it's problematic, but I don't know that we're going to answer it tonight. So I'm going to skip back up to open space right before we get to build out. There are 2 items in open space, maybe 3 if you count what I think is a duplicate. So the first item, please break down the 50 acres out of the total of 140 of open space. What are the sub pieces? And then the question I think is close to being a duplicate. Describe the 50 acres being deeded back to the town and why that particular area was chosen. Um, uh, the part of why it was chosen is different. So I think I'm going to just create a second question that says why were those particular areas chosen? That's
Well, some of that got answered last night too. I think some of it's on the side closer to the Wilbur Cross Parkway and useless to them.
yeah.
Some,
My last night was great. There's a lot of information that came out, and I learned a lot. Um, in doing these questions, I think I'd like to all those answers. A lot of the information came out last night were verbal. They're not in the proposal. I think it's appropriate for some of the important questions that, even though we know the answer now, that maybe others don't.
I agree with you totally. I'm just
Yeah.
highlighting the fact that it's not a great gift. It's unusable property to them.
Yeah.
Offered.
Yeah. So I mean, we can. Yeah. We'll.
But I think, Tim, you're right. If they give us answers in writing, it's better than just the verbal.
Yeah, because my hope is to, that what are the answers, the written answers we get back will, and then our comments on the answers and the implications of the answers can go into the public record.
Right.
And Dave will ask you at some more appropriate time, how do we make sure they get in the public record? But you can maybe help us with that. So I've rephrased that second, the violet, and the why were those particular areas chosen, kind of related. Um, and then the second item, approximately how much of the 12 acres of the bike walking paths is deep, wide tree cover? And just okay. And if no questions on that, then we move on to build out. The first one, once the project is started, what's the length of time there will be disturbed surfaces before construction is completed? Um, I may, this next one doesn't, maybe I got out of order. What is the total perimeter of disturbance if different than above? I think that should say than rather than that. But it strikes me that the next question should, I'm going to switch the order of these two questions, and the person who submitted these can maybe help me if I'm capturing the meaning of what is the total perimeter of disturbance if different than the above. Um,
Well, I think if I was one who did it, often when they're clearing a site, they clear a lot and then they plant stuff back. So these disturbed land post construction is very different than the amount of disturbed land they did to create the house or the road. So I'm trying to get a sense in that. Are they
So-
like
But
totally
it's still disturbed, Sharon.
right?
so
Even
Sharon,
if
let's,
it's planted, it's been disturbed.
That's true. So I think I just want to know how much is truly disturbed and how much is really left completely unaffected. If it's the same or the amount of the land as the land they gave to us, or is pretty much all the land that they are using disturbed, or they leave some of that undisturbed as well.
okay, so having, keep that in mind, and so let me go back to the couple questions here. The first one being, what is the percentage of undisturbed land will there be? So is there a better way to phrase that? What percentage?
I forget. I don't think the will there be. What percentage of the land is undisturbed? What percentage is disturbed? What is the
What
total?
percentage is left undisturbed?
Percentage.
What percentage of land is left undisturbed?
I'm gonna say what percentage of the parcel it will be left undisturbed? Okay, everybody's okay with that? What percentage of the parcel will be left undisturbed? And then the next question, what is the total perimeter of disturbance of different than above? I've lost the reference to the above.
Okay, then just what is the total perimeter of disturbance?
Okay, and what does a perimeter of disturbance mean?
You know, where they haven't touched it at all, where the bulldozer haven't
Oh.
been, where the
But
Yeah.
that would be the same as the the other one. What
What percentage of
land will
the
not be
parcel will be left undisturbed?
basically just saying it from the two different perspectives. That
Okay, so perhaps we don't need both then. And so I'll leave what percentage of the parcel will be left undisturbed. Take out the other.
But
Oh.
the difference is, and that's the third question, is what percent is undisturbed that they're already not disturbing because they're deeding it over? I'm trying
Right, and that's, because I'm editing, I don't, well, I guess I have to go and scroll that screen, don't I? Yes. All right, so let me scroll the screen for you, in case you're looking at the screen. So yeah, that's the fourth question here on the screen, and I'm gonna leave that as is
Okay.
in the edited document.
Okay.
Okay, and then the next question, what intended protections during construction do you intend to employ, et cetera, et cetera? Comments on that? How many tons of material will be moved from the site? Questions, concerns? Is there accountability for bringing any toxic materials to the site?
I think that should be also amended because we've now learned that there's toxic materials on the site from
all the mitigation that has to happen.
yeah. So who's responsible? Who owns that land, and who will continue to be responsible for that mitigation? And
So help me with the phrasing of that question. Who will be responsible? Is it that? Is that the thrust of the question?
for known toxic and known and unknown already, already on the property.
Who will be responsible
For its mitigation.
for mitigate all the mitigation that is needed on the parcel? is and will be.
Um,
Both financially and, I don't know whether you can say physically, however.
um, okay, how about, is this captured? Who will be responsible for known and yet to be discovered contamination mitigation? Does that capture it?
That will, yeah.
It again, please?
Who will be responsible for known and yet to be discovered contamination mitigation?
I'd like to say add both financially
Okay,
and whatever the other word is, the
cleanup?
physical need for cleanup, the actual physical cleanup.
Yeah, okay,
Well, it'll be the owner of the property. So if we own the property, the town owns the property, and they sell off that portion, then they have to do the mitigation. Right now, we don't have to do the mitigation because the land is sitting idle. If they own the property, they'll have to do the mitigation. The question is, are they gonna charge the town back for that? Are they gonna take it off the purchase price? You know, it's not cheap to do that. Last estimate was $800,000. And that
But
was
that was only for the storage buildings. It doesn't even mention the old clubhouse or the new clubhouse or anything.
You're right. There's a lot of asbestos in the old club, in the old clubhouse. That's
In the
right.
new clubhouse, but I'm talking about the
I
old
know what
club.
you're talking about. You're talking about the one down Johnson and
Down on Johnson, yeah, where they're putting a dog park.
correct.
all
Yeah,
right.
that's correct.
So to that question I read, I'm gonna add any planned chargeback.
Or any charge by
Uh,
slash.
I'm gonna, excuse me, I'm gonna interrupt you and then myself and I'm gonna say not planned, but any intended chargeback. Do they intend to charge back?
Hmm.
They can say they never intended to, but they needed to once they realized it.
Well, um,
Does this release the town from any responsibility?
I mean, they don't plan to now because they don't know of any until they uncover it.
Well, we can flesh it out when we're talking to them.
Right, yeah, this raises the question. Um, Gets it on the table. Okay. Is there funding for more building inspectors? Is the present staff expected?
Tim, I
Yep.
also, there's sink disposals and other. So I'm just wondering if there's going to be environmental restrictions on these houses, like disposals in all of them, or can people do pools, or can they? So I know it's a little question, but I'd like it to,
Yeah,
So-
will there be environmental restrictions on the houses? That was your question, right? Will
Yeah.
there be environmental restriction on the houses?
Mhm.
Do we want to give an example? Clarify what we mean by that or leave it open?
well, let's think about that later.
Okay.
That isn't
Uh,
even, that's not required at all where there's sewers, right? Or is it?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, usually
I don't know either.
yeah, usually if you have public, waste sewers, the garbage disposals aren't a concern, which
Right.
I think was, um, um,
It's a general enough question they can
yeah.
talk about.
Yeah.
So does that mean that they're intended for like a wastewater treatment or waste treatment as opposed to like septic systems?
There is plans for public waste, public sewers and public wastewater and, yeah.
I have a question about that. Who have the sewage, the people who are going to be receiving the sewage, have they been spoken to and accepted the excess sewage?
Well, he represented yesterday in the other presentation I attended that they had contacted the public utilities and had received assurances that there was capacity.
Okay, well, I hope there's a difference between them saying it and them it being proven to us. But yeah, okay, good.
Are there any assurances that your company is solvent? How many structures is your break-even number? Are a certain percent of house sales or anticipated dollars necessary for construction to be completed? Um, will there be environmental restrictions on the houses? That's what we just added, excuse me. Um, will there need to be blasting and how much? Do I have this in the right section? Is that should really be in build out? Oh, we are in build out, excuse me.
You already part of a question number 5 or 6.
Um,
Number 6.
Yeah, how many tons of material would be that one? Yeah, will there be blasting? Okay, so that's a duplicate. Thank you, Sharon, for spotting that. I'm going to take it out. There is a need for a lot of remediation, storage buildings, blah blah. Who is doing it and who will pay for it? So I'm going to take the question we added, who is responsible for the known mitigations, and I'm going to sort of put it down here at the bottom.
Can I make a suggestion here?
Yeah.
You're talking about blasting, you're talking about sewer. They're gonna need to bury those sewer lines. And most of that property there is ledge. I don't know how deep the soil goes. So that, I mean, how deep do they have to bury the sewer lines? And have they considered that, the need for blasting those sewer lines?
Yeah. All right. I like the question of how deep. I'm going to phrase it more generally and say, how deep do the utilities need to be buried?
But you might
Are
go
they paying for running these, extending all these sewer lines, et cetera?
Well, my comment is that the water and sewage lines are on the adjacent streets.
that doesn't cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to put them through the whole structure.
Well, I think as with if there was, a water line in front of your house, the utility company puts it on the main street and you're responsible to paying for the connection to it. So I think that it's the same here is what I've heard expressed. Now they would have to run it throughout the property, and I think Dave's question goes to that. Is
But my question is there are not sewer lines yet there.
there are on the adjacent streets that they can connect to.
I don't know about that. Do you know?
I don't think they run up that far.
Only on the Ansonia Road portion.
Yeah, well, and so
Not on
what they will
Woodfield
do-
and not on Johnson.
Okay, so what they will do, I assume, is they will, when they dig their internal to the complex lines, they will run them all together and down to Ansonia Road to connect the public utilities that are there.
Is that all their cost?
Yes.
Okay.
That's part of the development
That
of.
was my question.
That's part of the development. I mean, I mean, I can phrase that as a question if we don't, I think, I guess it's an assumption on my part, but I mean, there's no other way, that's what's expected from the utility companies. And when you build a housing project, you expect, if you're saying you're providing that and connecting to the public utilities, that's part of the cost of putting it up. And that's why you're charging $1 million for each house, the big one, because you have to cover those costs. But I can phrase a question in here if you'd like to add it.
I think Dave's question of how deep will they have to bury it, and all the utilities, especially sewage, and have they considered the amount of blasting that might be involved in that if it's a ledge?
Yep. Yeah. So I had captured Dave's question is how deep do each of the utilities need to be buried? And I will add to it, will blasting be necessary for this? So that'll go to how and well, I don't want to get too deep into what they said last night. He sort of said, we don't know where every rock is.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
we don't know what the what the blasting will be.
that's not a good answer.
Yeah.
That's blasting is a big deal, right? I mean,
Well,
they
it is. Yeah.
find out because it's a huge disturbance to the neighbors. It's a huge amount of destruction
Yeah.
to the earth. So
Yep.
that's really not for the Conservation Commission. That is not an adequate answer, in my opinion.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I have the question.
Mhm.
So let me go back to the violet, one where there's a lot of remediation to be done. And we have a question at the end: who is doing it and who will pay for it? And so then we added a question: who will be responsible for known and yet to be discovered contamination mitigation? So I'm going to strip out the violet: who is doing it and who will pay for it, and just rely on the second question, if that's okay with everybody. And we'll dedupe that one. And if we're set, we're moving on to deeding and other protections over time. Okay, so we're at 8:20. We've been going an hour and 10 minutes. Um, and we've got another page or so to go. Um, so how will the open space be preserved? By what legal means? Open space, will it be deeded as protected open space in perpetuity? Those seem to me to be the similar questions.
Mm-hmm.
But they're both.
Um,
That's what the crux of our mission is, though. So if
yeah,
they twice, that's fine with me.
yeah. But we just don't need two questions, perhaps. Um,
But deeded into perpetuity by what legal means and into perpetuity, because I think that's the key thing is any land that's protected, can we be assured that it will forever be protected? Because I've seen it that been reversed a few times.
Yep. So I'm changing the first one to say by what legal means into perpetuity, and that will take the second one. Be able to delete the second one. Will the affordable units, the affordable changing units to houses, just remain affordable by deed restriction after resale? Will affordable homes be deed restricted so they stay affordable? Well, I think I just put two questions that were similar together. If you have a preference for the first phrasing of the second, tell me which one I should delete.
Whichever.
Doesn't matter. Okay, both good. So I've taken away the second one. Can you? By the way, can you still see this on the? No, I need to scroll again. Sorry. Um, okay. Oh, we have two pages to go. Actually, I didn't realize. Beyond age restriction where appropriate, are there other deed restrictions planned? Will bike paths on private property be permanently protected by deed in all cases? Any other features protected by deed? Are the double tree lines on Insigne and Johnson um, on private property? I know they are. If so, are, I should say, are the trees protected by deed or other means? I'm going to say, are the trees themselves protected by deed or other means? So, the trees are advertised to be a big feature of the property. So, are you protecting the trees? What protections are there to keep age restricted housing age restricted? We added that question during the session today.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Any other deed questions, protection questions? And we'll move on to sustainability and environmental. What sustainability features, both immediate and future use, will be included? Will there be an evaluation for endangered species for these properties? That question. And I'm assuming you're all reading along on the other, on what's being shared. So I'm not reading every word of every question. If that's not the case, tell me. I'll read every word. How much impervious surface is being created? Is there a way to minimize that? Will there be any disturbance to wetlands, etc.? This one needs a little wording help, I think. Design of houses, no low impact development action. I don't understand. I guess we want to really turn this into what somebody help me with this.
Isn't there a standard? What's the green? There's a, what is it called? Like, building I'm in has a, like, forget the name, but it gets a green something. It gets,
Yeah, it's green, not green spaces.
anyway, are they planning on following that kind of criteria in terms of insulation, in terms of any number of aspects of it?
How about what minimal environmental impact design features are being added to each home
Are being incorporated in each
are,
home.
are being incorporated each home I'm going to say by default, but that may not be quite the right word. It's really,
I would also say in each building. Expand it to any of the buildings they're building.
well, true, incorporated in each, good point. Because what I don't want it is to get an answer that it just depends on what the person wants. That's not what we're after, I don't think. Okay. Natural remediation of invasive plants. I guess I must have skipped these. I didn't form these into questions, which I was trying to do.
The real question is there any prevention of planting invasive species in this new?
Say it again, Sharon. Sorry, is there?
That question, but it comes to mind that will there be a restriction on planting invasive species in this?
Well, okay,
I thought of it oppositely. I thought this question was, are they going to get rid of any invasive species that exist now?
Well, that's all.
It was both of those.
Okay, I went back up the deeds and protections over the time to type the question. Will there be any restrictions?
Sorry, so one part of it was like, are there requirements for all the plantings that go in there to be
native,
native pollinators, native whatever? And then the other question, I mean, just, if you drive anywhere in town, there's, invasives all over the place. So I guess what was is there a plan to eradicate the invasive?
Those are invasives, yes.
Okay, so let me okay, so is there a plan to eradicate invasive
species on the property?
I can say invasives, right?
Invasive species on the property.
Thank you.
And will people be restricted from planting invasive plants?
Okay, and I put that up on the deed restriction. Okay, so I think I got that. Is there a plan to use a percent of locally sourced materials and labor? Will there be a green building design for all buildings? So is that a duplicate?
That's,
Yeah.
that's what you meant from the design of the houses, yes.
Yeah. So what minimal environmental impact design features are being incorporated? I'm going to remove that question in deference to the will there be a green building design? So, save this. Will this development put new expensive demands on existing town resources? With more impervious surface, there will be increased stormwater runoff. And here, the second sentence, what would the mitigation strategy be to reduce, disconnect the increase in stormwater? It was a typo of some type.
So
So-
disconnect isn't the right word.
Yeah, no, it's not, and that's why I put it in red. What would to reduce? I guess we can just take it out and just say
Take
reduce.
it out, right.
Yeah. Okay.
And I mean, ideally, it should be 0. It shouldn't be more. So reduce isn't even enough. It's like reduce and you know,
Or ensure that there's no increase or.
pardon
To
me.
eliminate. How about what's the
Eliminate.
mitigation strategy to eliminate?
Any increase in stormwater runoff.
Okay. To eliminate. Okay. What precautions are being taken to not affect neighbors and neighboring ecosystems with change in water runoff? And then in the violet.
I would leave out with change in the water runoff and just say
Oh,
neighboring ecosystems, neighbors and neighboring ecosystems,
Yeah,
not,
I think that's
not
better.
to affect them. I mean, in any way.
okay. Yeah. No. Everybody good with that?
Yep.
Okay. Good suggestion. And then I'm just going to flip over to what you're seeing. Just so I can try to scroll down to those purple items, which were the ads. Back over. Are they doing a study of water
Have we
courses?
done amenities and recreation?
No.
Oh,
Barbara,
these are the ads to that one. I'm
these
sorry.
are the ads
Yep,
as
yep,
shown
yep,
on the
yep.
screen. Are they doing a study of water courses, especially underground? Have we captured that already? Do we need to wordsmith that into?
No, I think that's a good thing.
Um,
I mean, are
I
we
don't
affected?
think we captured it anywhere.
so I just want to express it as a question. What investigations are planned into studying the water courses? Just give me a second.
Maybe including underground, not especially.
Yep. Including. Okay, I think I got it. Whoops, I need to put a question mark on it. What will they do to mitigate the loss of trees, wildlife, and other aspects of nature's? Okay. So what?
That could be
mitigate-
endangered species question number 2 for sustainability. Those could be one right next to each other. They're sort of similar.
Where are you talking about, Sharon?
Let me scroll. Let me go to the shared and scroll to where Sharon is talking about. She's
No,
talking about the second item. Will there be an evaluation for endangered species
Oh,
for these properties? So perhaps we can, if there's anything implied by the one in violet, maybe we can incorporate it into that one. So Barbara, anything that else needs to be incorporated up into that second item under sustainability?
Like a flora and fauna study.
Um, yeah, I think it's really incorporated in here. I mean,
Yeah, with,
except it, oh, here's, will native plants be planted? We
I think
have,
that's a totally separate question.
yeah, it is, and I thought we had it someplace else. So let me, hang on a second.
I mean,
Uh,
what is the planning plan is
Yeah.
the question.
All right, I've
Slash.
separated that. But the second item now has two parts. Will there be an evaluation for endangered species for these properties? What wildlife habitats will be destroyed? What remediation is planned? And then should I, same questions for, um, flora? Is that, can I shortcut it and just say that? Diana, you just mentioned fauna and flora.
Yeah,
Can I just say same questions for flora and imply the same? Yeah. Okay. All right. So now I'm down to the purple. Will an air quality study be done? Is that a,
I don't know if that's really something in our purview. It can't hurt to ask, but
okay. All right. No, it can't. So I'm going to take those last two and just change the font. Just give me 1 second, please. Just making a couple changes to the color to get them consistent. And now I think we're ready to go down to amenities and recreation. So let me change your screen.
about amenities and recreation, I think
Amenity,
all great questions, but I don't think they're what we need to be talking about, really, personally. I mean, I would love there to be a pool that's a good size and stuff, but I think we should really be emphasizing the environment. I think we're going to water down our curiosity if we put too many of these and not really continue to really just be more concerned about the environment. But let's go through them and see if that makes sense.
Yeah.
To others.
well, for the first one, I think it's obvious from the presentation that there's a pool.
yeah.
My question about the pools was, so there's a pool for the facility, but does that mean that, some of the houses that are, the $800,000 houses that are going on an acre and a half, that they are not allowed to construct their own private pool? And so I guess that was my question about the pools, is like, were they just planning on developing one pool, or are the options for some of the units, for some of the houses, to have their own pool? Because that does make it a difference about how the land is being used, I think, in conservation.
Well, that's, to me, that's a different question than the phrasing I see here. And that's more along the lines, are private pools going to be allowed? Uh, and Sharon, is that, is that within our
Relevant
area
question.
of concern?
I think everyone has a pool that will be more environmental impact than if people don't.
Right. So our private pools, I'm just allowed. I changed that question to our private pools allowed. So to Sharon's point, upgraded tennis courts, pickleball lines, well, the recreation department should be asking that, I would think.
The only question I have about that is, what is pickleball?
Yeah, that'd be another meeting.
Sorry.
It's tennis for people who are a little lazy, don't want to run as far. That's the answer. Okay, I'm gonna take that question out. Describe any access for I can do that because I wrote the question. I don't know, I just. Describe any access for pedestrians and bikers from existing surrounding neighborhoods accessing some of the amenities. Um,
We got an answer to that, and that's that people will be allowed, but
well, yeah, yeah, the thrust of this
That's not
question
what
is
the
more,
question is. It's the access.
it,
Where,
it's parking, it's combined with the next one. You know, are we gonna be building parking for people, or what do
question.
we expect them to do? Or, when you used to go sledding, you kind of try to find a place
park
to park,
along the road.
along the road, and it wasn't such a safe thing to do. So, um, so maybe we'll go over these to make them fresh in everybody's mind, and then Sharon, we can decide if we just want to kind of eliminate. Um,
Okay, so let's go for it. Describing this for pedestrian and bikers from existing surrounding neighborhoods accessing some of the amenities. Please describe parking considerations for Woodbridge residents wishing to access. I think those are the same thing.
Those are pretty much the same thing, aren't they?
So we
Yeah.
just
Well, but not really, because it says describe access for pedestrians and bikers, and then it says describe parking considerations for others.
yeah,
So,
two different types of users.
well, please
right.
describe access, whether pedestrian, bikers, or cars, for Woodbridge residents wishing to access some of the amenities.
Okay.
That's fine.
Are all amenities available for public town recreation, no private pools or tennis courts? Any limits on usage of ice skating, pond, tennis courts, pools for any Woodbridge resident? So,
Yeah. Well,
are townspeople allowed? Yeah, we can keep that. I don't care. What size considerations are given to the amenities, such as pool? Do we want to keep that in? Yes.
I don't understand what the question is. Is it for the pool that they're talking about, like the clubhouse pool?
yeah. This was mine, and I instead of what size considerations are given to the amenities, it really should be for the amenities, and it gets to, um, is the design creating a problem? But are you saying here's a public pool, but, and the pool might be a bad example, but, um, you know,
Public tennis courts, but there are only 2 tennis courts.
well, yeah, well, there's lots of tennis courts around town, I guess, but for a pool, it's the only pool. So are you building a pool that's not really going to accommodate, the number of people that want to use it, um, et cetera, et cetera. So, they have some other amenities. I guess you can ask the same question, but I'm willing to give this up if we want to
No, I
strip.
think now that you put it into that context, that makes sense.
Please describe the bike walking paths in details. Um, I think we have this in another place. I'm going to take this out. We have this up in design.
Right, we do.
What are the dimensions and construction of the bike paths? In design, we probably, well, this, um, I was interested in how big these things are going to be, and it gets to the, are they usable, um, and safe, but maybe not our prime concern, to Sharon's point. Um, and then
You
who's
leave the
responsible?
last one, and I would say it should be who is responsible for all the amenities, not just the bike paths and walking
Okay,
paths.
I can add that. Okay, so
yeah.
I've reduced that number of questions. There's now 6, less than what we had. Some of the other questions, and um, and I think it'd be good for us to try to get out of here by 9.
But
So we have-
another question, another thing in terms all this after, are we done with all the questions?
There's just one more section. I'm sorry, maybe I need to move the screen. No, the other questions, concerns?
What's
Um,
HOA? I'm sorry.
Homeowners associations.
Oh.
Uh,
Owners
Is
Association.
is that a definite? They're planning a homeowners association there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so please describe that, and also have you calculated the cost in money and time, including hours various boards are required to contribute to this project? So I wrote that question. I don't know if it's relevant, but I just want to speak to the whole thing. And David, maybe you can, other people who listen to the meeting. From my perception of the meeting, 30 or 40 people raised concerns, and I didn't hear anyone raise support for this. And I'm just kind of curious, given that kind of momentum, is that what other people are perceiving from what they're hearing from people? And if so, what is the motivation behind the town selectmen for being so interested in this proposal if they're getting such an overwhelming sense that people upset and stressed about it and not?
I don't. I don't get the sense that the board of selectmen are overly in favor of, or not in favor of, but just that they're following the sort of protocol to hear the proposal out and to have it be brought in front of the appropriate commissions to be heard in front of the town. So I don't get the sense that they're going one way or the other. But the homeowner association is a real red flag for me.
Why is that? I don't know anything about homeowners association.
I mean, they're very much like, I mean, the way that this whole thing is being described is, oh, it's, access for everybody, access, to swimming pool and to biking and walking paths. And that is very not like a typical homeowners association. Homeowners association are like, pay to play. You live in the association, have access to the amenities. That's what you're, paying for. I mean,
Right.
it's similar to like a condo association,
Yeah.
but
Has to be
and
spent.
they can be very restrictive.
Right. But
Well-
the town is going to manage the pool. They made that clear last night.
Yeah, I think.
And is like the recreation and put department to do the tennis courts and the walking trails and the biking trails and
The,
Yeah,
the
I
dog
think.
parks and the children's area and so forth. I mean,
right.
the pool's only one aspect of
Well,
presumably public access.
yeah, I guess I could talk to some of that based upon what I've heard, but I'd like to not and let them answer it when they come to talk to us. I think that's a good question. They have described that, and so Diana, I think that will come out when we meet with them, and you can probe into that a little bit more.
I have a question for David Lober.
Yep.
Will Department of Public Works get a say in this, especially if there's a creation of various trails that they have to maintain? I mean, I've spoken with Warren, and my sense is that adding anything in to their current budget would really be not possible.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question, but the trails that we have in town, I don't believe are maintained by the Department of Public Works. They're maintained by either the Park Association or the Land Trust,
Trust.
or by the
Or by the town,
the town.
through the trail master and volunteers.
That was the word I was looking for. There's a
Let-
trail that takes care of
Let-
those.
I was trying not to go. I was trying not to go down this path, but let me mention very quickly that the homeowners association will collect a fee, and the fee is for the maintenance. As stated last night, the fee is for the maintenance of the roads. So the public works will not do the roads within the complex, and for the maintenance of the bike paths and walking trails. And so that is to cover the maintenance of those items. So theoretically, they would have to hire snow plowing for the roads, for instance.
So the homeowners association is charging a fee to the homeowners and
Per
so
month.
they are paying for the public.
No, well,
have access?
no, they're private, they're private property, but the structure will allow anybody to drive on the roads. They're not restricted to the, so it's not a gated community, no entrance. Anybody will be able to allow them to drive on the roads, but the homeowners association is collecting fees and for the maintenance of the roads.
I'm talking more particularly about the recreational part of
Okay,
it.
that's a different animal because while the Arbor Haven will either recondition the tennis courts, for example, or build a new pool because it's not reconditionable. And in the end, after they do that, they are going to deed that over to the town, that property and the improvements they've made to the town. Therefore, those will become town responsibility.
Hmm.
And as I say, rather not take our last 10 minutes here and try to get through every detail on that. There's a few more details, and I think they can talk to those more accurately than probably I can in relaying it secondhand from what I heard. But I believe that's pretty accurate as it says. There are pieces that I'm not sure of, which is trying to do a bus turnaround place and a playground, and those I can't remember if those are deeded to the town or not. So they can answer that question. So I would like to get to the last few questions here to complete this list, and then figure out how we use the last 5 minutes of our call. If we do, in fact, want to end at 9, or maybe we can go a few minutes past. Sharon, you read the first two questions here. Any changes necessary for those two? We want to leave them in.
What does everyone else think? I'm not sure.
I'd like the first one. I want to know about the homeowners in detail. So I love that one. The cost of the
More,
volunteers.
I think that's a question for the selectmen to realize the costs that are being incurred and to see if there's really going to be profit and mitigation of town expenses after all this is done. So I think that's
Okay.
not.
I'll strip that out of Arbor Haven's questions. Then we can take that up with the Board of Selectmen at some point if we can. Will you be asking for zoning changes? And these two are these two questions in Violet the same question, or how are they different? Will you be asking for zoning changes, and will there need to be zoning changes?
I wrote both of them, and I intended to ask really oppositely, will there need to be zoning changes for the plan that they have in place right now? And will they be asking for further zoning changes for extra things which always come up? And I mean, for instance, the whole thing about commercial. They say they're not going to build commercial now, but they're going to need zoning changes if they want commercial in there at some point.
Yeah.
So
Well,
that was for to what and for what.
yeah, I understand for the present plan, so that somebody can answer that question. But for things that come up, I mean, that's a theoretical. How I guess the answer is they will if they need to for things
Well,
that come up.
my
Um,
point
you
is
know,
they had commercial in there. I guess I'm trying to get them to say, yeah, in 3 years or 1 year or 15 years, we're intending to add commercial to it. Yeah,
uh,
that,
yeah,
that,
I I almost want to write a question um, that says, when are you going to be washing your hands of this whole thing?
yeah.
There's a better way to say that, but I had a sense that once they're going to build these, and once they sell the last unit, they're done. They walk away. Um, but maybe I'm wrong, and maybe it's worth asking a question around that. What? So maybe the question is, what is your involvement after the last house is sold? Does that make sense as a question?
I think it's a different question, but I'd be curious to their answer.
and that may, give us some, some sense. I mean, that may get away from the speculation what's going to happen in 5 years. You're going to come in and decide to do something. You're going to want to build more units. I have a sense they just want to build them, sell them, and go on to the next project.
Well, also leads to one of our very earliest questions, how long to build everything?
Yeah, and they have an answer for that, so I'll let them give that. So I'm still having Barbara a question problem, Barbara, with, and maybe it's just a rephrasing. Will you be asking for zoning changes to what, for what?
No,
with-
take it out if you don't feel.
yeah, maybe I'll clarify the second question and say, will there need to be zoning changes for the residents, and then for what? What do you need the zoning change for? The future one, and if you reflect on that and there's something we need to add on, we can. And maybe you can ask that verbally when we have the presentation. Okay. And then the last one, describe the 50 acres being deeded back to the town and why that particular area was chosen. Is that a duplicate? I think I may have copied and pasted. I will check
Scroll up
that.
more so I can see it. What did you say?
Um,
Can you
I
scroll up a little more? 'Cause it's-
Sure, hold on a second. No, it's there, the very last item. Describe
Okay.
the 50 acres being deeded back to the town and why
There,
that particular area was chosen. The only problem I have with that is that I think I may have copied it someplace else and we've already addressed it. So I will double check that it's not a duplicate. And with that,
What
we'll,
about the one about the maximum number of homes that can be built under the present zoning?
that's there.
Is it there above? Yeah, it's there. You hadn't.
The answer to that question is 1,500.
1,500?
Yeah, because the regulations say that when you have sewer and water, you can put up multifamily housing, 15 units per acre. So 15 times 100 is 1,500.
Wow.
Yeah, they won't do that, but that's the answer to
But
that
that,
question.
I mean, they could sell it to somebody else who would try to do it.
Well, you try to arrange the contract so they couldn't do that, but see, here's the problem. If they can't sell their houses and they want to sell whatever's undeveloped, what do you do about that? How do you protect from that? So that's something to think about.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, with that, we'll close out this item with the concurrence of the members. Here, I will skip and defer most of the items on the agenda until our next meeting, given that we have time. We'll probably have the presentation from Arbor Haven, some wrap up of that, and so we may not even get to all the items then. I would like, if there's no objection to skipping these items, I would like to make one comment on the minutes and then let Dave take um, uh, some time for his liaison report before we close. The comment on the minutes, I didn't even include approval of the minutes on tonight's agenda. And I'd like to, this is a request to all of you. We will send them out. Diana, we'll write up the minutes for tonight. Prior to next meeting, I will send out the minutes for 3 meetings. And I would ask that you each read through the minutes, and if there are corrections to be made, just to feed them back in a timely manner so that we can correct it offline. And so when we come to our meetings, which always seem to be short on time, we can save time in those meetings by not having to figure out what needs to be changed and trying to document that and wordsmith that. And that would just expedite, I think, things for us. We can get the changes offline and the approval of the minutes becomes, norm, probably typically perfunctory. Once in a while, we might need to correct something. So that would be my request to you. And with that, Dave, I'll give you the mic
Okay,
and your liaison report.
right. Well, a lot of this is redundant, but I'll go over the special meeting we had with the Arbor Haven presentation, which is different from the presentation that they made last night, and I'll point that out. So they're offering approximately $9 million, which is, depending, I guess, on what the other costs incur will be, but they said approximately $9 million for 100 acres to build 145 homes. So there'll be 35 large homes along Ansonia and Johnson, 3, 4, and 5 bedrooms priced at $700,000, $800,000, and $900,000. There will be 26 medium homes of 3 bedrooms that are priced at $625,000, and 62 age-restricted homes with 2 or 3 bedrooms priced at $650,000 and $725,000, and 22 affordable homes of 2 or 3 bedrooms priced at $230,000 or $265,000. And it appears that 11 of these will be age restricted now. Originally, it was 15, so they changed that. In the original presentation, they estimated an average of 2.25 school children per home for 68 homes or 153 new school-age children. They've changed that now to 1.5 children per home and total of 86 children. They estimated originally that it would cost $12,000 per child, and the way they did that is they took the entire budget, they took out the fixed costs, and then they divided what was left by the number of children, and they came out with a number of 12,000. But they revised that number now to 17,500, which is a more realistic number since it costs $20,000 to send a student to the Amity system. We get charged per head by the Amity system, so $20,000 is a real number. What they failed to take into account is two things: the class sizes that we have at Beecher Road School, which now are set at about 22, and if you put, say, 10 children in a grade, it will require splitting off another classroom. So the approximate cost of staffing another classroom is approximately $100,000. But they didn't figure that in. The other problem, I spoke with Dr. Budd today, the Beecher Road School is at capacity. They have taken every possible available space and made it into classrooms. If they have an infusion of students, they're going to have to put a wing on that building. So that is a real consideration. That will be many, many millions of dollars. So they're returning 50 acres to the town, which will include the parking lot across the street, the rocky area along Woodfield Road, and the area around the lake. There was also an RFP for selling the clubhouse for a banquet hall that was proposed by Jim Urbano, but that has not been published yet. They're holding on to that. There's another proposal for the country club. This is the brewery, a company called the Phipps Development. They propose purchasing 25 acres of the property for $1.5 million for construction of the brewery. And they want to also build houses. And I think they want to build 100 houses, but I don't have that written down here, so that may be wrong. Budget meetings will start in November. Oh, there was a hearing the cell tower the 21st, and there is going to be, there was a test for there was a test for an alternate site behind the Public Works garage, and I don't know what the result of that test was, but the cell tower people, Verizon, want that site because they feel that's the best site for them to obtain coverage. The senior center was flooded, so that was closed. The Darling House has a tenant, which was recommended by the Amity Woodbridge Historical Society and was approved by the Board of Selectmen. And then there's another item here which is pertinent. There's something called the American Rescue Plan. It's got a $2.6 million grant available to fund needs and losses arising from COVID-19, including public health funding, economic impact, loss of revenue from taxes, essential needs such as sewer, water, and broadband expansion, HVAC improvement to public buildings, and the upgrading of outdoor recreational spaces, including parks and playgrounds. So those are the relevant things from those meetings from the liaison report. Any questions about anything?
Doesn't seem like it, David. Thank you.
Okay.
So with that, I thank everybody for their patience on this long session tonight, but we did complete the questions, which I'm happy about. I will find out the date. I assume it's just will be our regular meeting in October. I believe third Thursday of the month. I think it's the 21st. And with that, I will make a motion to adjourn.
I so
Somebody
moved.
needs to second it, so unless you want to stay here. And if nobody seconds it, we can stay and do some other things.
I think Barbara seconded it.
Okay.
Oh, I thought I moved, but that's okay.
Oh,
I'll
wait.
second it if I didn't move.
Okay. So Diana, you have your pick of people, I think, to say who moved and seconded, and
Tim, I made you the motion, and Barbara seconded.
okay. And with that, I think we are adjourned. Thank you very much. Let me know if you think of any other questions before I'm not sure when I'll be sending it off, but sometime shortly. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Good night.
Good night.
Night.